When I'm writing formulas in Excel, I write a lot of indented formulas. And one of the things that kind of drives me nuts is when I go and select a cell like this one, and what I see in the formula bar is just equals if error, open parenthesis, or equals let, open parenthesis. And it's not immediately obvious that there's multiple lines going on here unless I actually very specifically look at the formula bar and go, hey, I'm missing something. That can be challenging. So we know that we can do certain things around this. We can press Control Shift U, which will open up the formula bar. But the problem with that is that now when I go back and select on a cell that doesn't need the formula bar collapsed, it now stays nice and big. So I've got to go back and press Control Shift U manually. Now, it's not the end of the world, obviously. It doesn't take that long to do it, but it does mean that I've pretty much got to look at my keyboard to find the right keyboard shortcuts to do it. So one of the things we've added to Monkey Tools is a new feature for everyone. So this is available in your free license. It is turned on by default. And basically what it does is this. Let me just go up to the Monkey Tools bar here. I'm going to check this checkbox next to Resize fxBar. So this is the default state that your Monkey Tools will show up in now. When I go and select it, you can see the formula bar automatically expands. When I click somewhere else, it automatically collapses to what it needs. And it looks for the number of hard returns that are in a cell, an Alt-Enter line break, and then expands the formula bar up to the number you set for the maximum number of rows. And you can always drag that bigger if you want. Let me just show you where to configure that actually. So I'm going to go into options. We're going to go into our global options and we're going to look down here. You can see that you can turn off the dynamic formula bar resizing and you can control the maximum number of lines right here. So if you want to set that to a maximum number of 5, you're going to grow bigger on your own. Totally fine to do. This checkbox stays in sync, the exact opposite of what you see on the ribbon over here. So as you can see now, as I go through and I start clicking through these cells, this stays nice and big, all good there. If I come down a little bit lower on this, you're going to see that a formula is a little bit different size here, so it dynamically shrinks it back down. Now, the one thing I do want to sort of call out though on this is that it can be a little bit jarring when you sort of hit this. You click on something, you click on something, you click on something, because it actually does shift the grid around quite a lot. And that's one of the reasons why we actually made sure that we added this to the Monkey Tools ribbon so that you can get out right from here and don't have to go into the options monkey to actually turn it off. And at this point now, it's going to stay exactly what it is, and I can manually collapse it if I need to do that. Okay. Don't forget also, because this is a ribbon control, you can just right click and add it to your quick access toolbar. And then you don't even have to be on the Monkey Tools tab at all. This setting will persist across instances of Excel. So if you turn it off because you don't like it, no problem. Next time you open Excel, it will not be on. So hopefully this little toggle here will make your life a little bit easier for reading your formulas. I hope you enjoy it in Monkey Tools. When I'm building Excel solutions, one of the things I really like to do is indent my formulas. The longer they get, the more important this becomes because it just helps me understand what's going on. It makes them more readable, and it certainly helps when we get into the debugging stage if they're indented nicely so I can sort of see what level I'm working at. Now, the problem with this is that indenting is a really manual process in Excel. You got to go and edit the formula. You got to press Alt-Enter for every line break you want. You can't use the tab key, so you got to be lining things up with a certain number of spaces. So if you've got a complex formula several levels deep, you might be pressing the spacebar 10 times on each row. It's just painful. Now, there are some tools that will indent a formula for you, like Microsoft's Advanced Formula Editor add-in that you can get. But I find it really finicky to work with because you pretty much got to do one cell at a time. You got to open it from the task pane, copy the formula, paste. It's just awkward. So what I wanted here was a really easy way to indent one or more cells simply. So that is what I've built here, and I'm hoping that you're going to like this, but I do need to let you know about a couple things. Number one, it's language agnostic. Whether you're in English or anything else, this should work for you. But number two is this is a pro feature. And what that means is if you're on a free license, the fxMonkeys button over here will be grayed out. You won't be able to access any of those tools, and the shortcut I'm about to show you also will not work. Okay, so but if you're on a pro license, I'm really hoping you're going to like this. So let's go and grab a few formulas. I do want to call out this one here. This is an if error round formula. If I take a look at this is an if error subtotal. We have a slightly different subtotal range in this particular one here. And down here, we've got an if error with just a difference in it. So there's a few different formula structures going on in this thing. So I'm going to grab all of this, and in order to indent it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control-Shift-I. And just like that, every one of these formulas has been indented. Because we have our dynamic resizing the formula bar on, you can see that it automatically showed up here nicely indented. And if I go and take a look, here's my subtotal, here's other subtotal. So everything's been preserved nicely, just indented. Here's my difference. Beautiful. Now, what if I want to unindent things? Sure, no problem. Let's go and grab all these guys here. This does require a button. So we're going to go to the fxMonkeys, hit the drop down arrow, and unindent formulas. And that will go and unindent them all. So there we go. We're right back to a flat single line entry. No problem. Of course, if you're looking carefully, you might notice as well that right here, there's indent formulas. So if you forget the Control-Shift-I shortcut, you can still go and click indent formulas and get the same behavior. Now, I know what some of you are thinking is, hey, Ken, I write macros and I have Control-Shift-I since nobody else uses it in Excel. I've got that assigned to trigger my macro. And now Monkey Tools is indenting instead of running my macro. What the heck is going on? No big deal. Anytime I override Excel's default behavior, it is really important to me that we give you a way to turn that off. So let's go turn it off. So if we go to the Options Monkey, we go to Global Options, what you can see here is that we have the ability to use the default Control-Shift-I shortcut behavior. And if I click that box and click close, at that point in time, Control-Shift-I will return to your use and Monkey Tools won't get in the way anymore. So your macros will start running just fine again. And it's important to know that this will stick between multiple instances of Excel. So when you open Excel next time, this setting will still be there and we will not be interfering with your macros at all. Okay? So an important thing to know, now, I do want this, so I'm going to turn this off and just say close because I want that behavior. I hope that you'll find the indentation, unindentation useful if you are on a pro license. More and more, as I build my formula stack in Excel, I am taking advantage of the let function. I just find that it makes my formulas easier to read, faster to calculate, and much easier to debug because I can control the final step and return an intermediate calculation very, very easily. Now, the challenge with that, of course, is that if you've got a formula like this and you're trying to convert this out to use a let function, how can you recognize that you've got a couple of different instances of H15? How do you go and wrap this in let and build your variables and all this kind of work? It takes a little bit of time. So for that reason, what we've done here is we've built something called the Letify Monkey. And I want to just show you here right now, I'm just going to select this block of cells in this area here. And these are all duplicate formulas. They're all relative, absolute, exactly the same. So it's basically the same unique formula. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab my Letify Monkey. And when I open the Letify Monkey up, it opens up this form here and it says, look, we recognize what your original formula is here. And you'll also notice that we've actually created you a let version of the entire thing here ready to go. Now, there's a few cool things around how this works is that I am using the auto name with preface, and I've used a preface of var. If I wanted to just go and use a preface of vars with an S, you'll notice that it's renamed every one of these variables for me. But this is just a handy thing to get me started. I'm going to go and get rid of this because this does get saved between instances for my preferences. I can now go and look at this by saying, hey, you know what? H15, this is the reference that I'm actually looking at, is now highlighted in blue on my worksheet. So I can see that's my volume increase override. So I'm just going to go and say, let's give this one a name. We'll call this rate override. Tab, and you can see it's updated in the formula for me, nice and ready to go. There's two uses of this particular one. Just some information that we need to know. That's all good. I'm going to hit tab and you'll now see that it says, all right, cool. We're looking at F7. Let's highlight that in the cell right over here. So this is the global increase rate. So I'm going to go and mark this one to rate global. There we go. Tab, tab, tab. We can now see that we've highlighted units sold. So we have the cell reference for you so that you can actually see what it is to help name your variables here. So this one here, this is my volume. Now, that's cool and everything, but I actually want volume to be at the top of my let statement. So I'm just going to go and say, let's move this up and up. And then to be honest with you, I want to move this one down because I want to go with my volume first, then my global rate, and then my override rate. There we go. Nice and easy. If I ever want to move back to the original cell, I can go and click on this little button here. It will take me and select the individual cell on the worksheet, or I can click on these individual cell references and bounce around to them to see exactly what's going on. You'll notice the formula bar, of course, expands and collapses depending on what's actually going on there. So we'll go back and see it hasn't applied it yet, but this is the original formula we have. These, by the way, if I just move this up here for a second, these are all of the identical cells that we have selected as well. So we can see what's going on with those as well if we need to for any reason. Now at this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and click apply, and you can see that it's now applied that formula here. And if I hit close, I go and take a look, you can see that it has indeed applied it to all of the common cells in that block. So there we go. Beautiful, nice, easy way to letify something from a simple factor. Now, let me go over to the P&L sheet over here, because in this case, I want you to notice here that we have a variety of different formulas. This has got an R8 divided by absolute R8. Over here, we've got R11 divided by absolute R8. Okay, so we're actually trying to divide by the percent of total revenue in this case. Here, we have a subtotal and a slightly different subtotal. This one here is picking up this range, and this one is picking up a larger range, okay? Down here, we have a difference that's going on in this cell as well that's actually subtracting a couple things here. So the question is, can we letify all of these? Well, why not? Let's go and grab all these guys here. Let's go to our fxMonkeys, Letify Monkey, and I'm just going to move this here out of the way so we can sort of see what's going on with this. And if we were to go and say, let me click on some of the identical formulas, I can see in this case what's going on. In my formula bar, it's showing me my R11. Over here is the original formula still. So I can look at this and say, all right, so what is R8 when it doesn't have anything here? This is going to be my current row. Meanwhile, over here, this is revenue. And there we go. Current row and revenue are both in there nicely. And again, if I wanted revenue up the top, because that one's sort of the absolute factor, I can do that by just moving it up. And now what I can do is I can go and say, apply. And that's going to apply this to all of these different cell blocks here. All of the identical formulas, including the origin, are now set up to that new formula. So now, if I can prove this, if I click on identical, you can see this is exactly what's going on in this. The current row is R11. Beautiful. Let me go and click next, because we've got 5 references inside here. There are 5 different unique formulas. So we'll click next. And at this point in time, we can see we've got a var1, which is pointing to these guys here. This is my cost of goods sold here. So I'm just going to go and rename this as COGS and update that. There we go. We can now go and say next on this one here. And this one here is going to be my gross profit. Let's put an underscore in there, make it a little bit easier to read as well. That's nice. We'll apply that. So we've now got our gross profit range. I should probably also mention with this one here as well, there is an option to name the final step. And I think this is actually a good option to do, because it means that I can always come down and just change this last option to gross profit, see what the gross profit is, and then change it back to return to get the final step out of it. On the other hand, if I don't like that structure, if I want to go gross profit and then go directly into the affair, if I uncheck this box, it will absolutely do that. You don't have to name the step and then call it again. It's just a best practice to do it, which is why I go that direction. All right, let's go and take a look at the next one. What do we got here? This looks like another subtotal. So this one though, this is my operating expenses. So we'll go op expenses. There we go. And then finally, at the end of this, it looks like we have here, we've got our gross profit. And finally, we're going to have our operating expenses, op expenses. So at this point, if I can type, there we are, I can apply that. I've now got my gross profit, my operating expenses with the return statement there. I can see that that's absolutely what's been put in the cell here. And now I can go and say, I can go back to previous, or I can close the form and everything's good to go. Now, the other thing though around this is that I also have the ability to go and grab a different block of cells and say, hey, I don't really want to leave this thing yet. I'm not done. So I'm going to say use selected cells. And this will now reset the entire form and say, all right, we've noticed in this case, you've got an external component here, which is on a different worksheet. We can see that we've got the off-sheet reference in this place. Again, if I go and click on this, it'll take me there so I can see it. I now know this is going to be my current month forecast. If I go back to F8, it'll take me back to the original sheet, and I can rename this one to forecast current month. There we are. and apply, and now we're good to go. Now, you might wonder, why would I ever go and name something that's just a single reference like that? Helps document a little bit, also helps set yourself up if you do need to make it a little bit bigger later on. This is a stylistic thing. You may not ever do this, but at the end of the day, it just makes it super easy to be able to actually build these things. So you don't have to put a lot of work and indenting into it in order to make it actually all happen. So hopefully you'll find that this is a useful feature available to all pro users of Monkey Tools. Hope you enjoy it. So one of the things that's important to me about the BiblioMonkey is that you know how to use everything in there. And this is why I actually don't give you a bunch of stuff right off the bat and get you to add your own, because you'll then know how everything actually works. So let me show you how we can populate a BiblioMonkey database with some things that hopefully you'll find useful. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop open my BiblioMonkey database here and show you that it is fairly empty. I have one formula in here for a global volume increase with override cells. I'm going to get back to that one a little bit later and show you how it works. But first, I'm going to show you how we actually create a new BiblioMonkey item. So let's look at the business problem first. Over here, I have a formula, which is taking my revenue and dividing it by the anchored gross revenue here. And this formula is used to determine a % of revenue for every single line item. However, it's showing a divide by zero error. Now you could argue and say, hey, you know what, Ken, you should really be testing whether or not R8 is 0 and then not dividing, and that's fair. But I'm going to be lazy here and do this a different way. I'm just going to wrap this in if error, comma 0. Okay, so we're going to go if error, comma 0, and close our parenthesis. So we're taking the existing cell contents that we had, the round R8 divided by the absolute R8, comma 3, and we're wrapping it in that if error construct. When I hit enter, you'll see that that works no problem. The thing is that I want to do that exact same thing to every single cell in this column. You think, well, how hard is that? Copy and paste. Well, yeah, but all the absolute and relative references are set up correctly. That's not a problem. You can see that here and here. These things are working just fine. But when we get to the next line, we've got a subtotal. Now, I still want to actually wrap this one in if error as well. Now, it may not be necessary, but I want to do it anyway, just in case. We move down to the next one. There's another subtotal here, so I can't copy paste that. If I move down to the table here, these ones here, well, these ones all look just fine. But then we get to another subtotal. And when we get into the foot right on the very bottom here, you'll notice this is a completely different structure altogether. So how do I go about wrapping these things all in an if error 0 construct as quickly as possible? And this is where the BiblioMonkey can come in and help you out. This is a common thing that I want to do, is wrap something in if error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire formula. Equals Control-C. There we go. We're now going to open the BiblioMonkey. And what we'll do is we'll go to Add New, and we'll add a formula. And I'm going to call this one if error 0. And then I'm going to give this a description. So there we go. Wrap the current cell contents in if error x0. I'm now going to go Control V and we'll paste the formula in here. Now remember, the original formula that I was dealing with was this, and this is the important and the hard part of working with BiblioMonkey, is making sure when you're selecting things, you don't get too much or too little. Once you've got that though, we want everything outside of what I've selected to be applied to the contents of the cell. So what I'm going to do is, instead of pasting this in, I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say, let's add a new prompt here for cell contents. Now this isn't actually going to prompt us. It's basically going to say, give me the contents of the Excel, strip off any equal sign that's in there, wrap it in any of the other characters that aren't within these curly brace tags, put the equals back on the front and stuff it in the cell. Just that simple. Let's prove that. We're going to hit save. There we are. And now you'll notice we have if error 0 here with the description that we put in. So I'm now going to hit exit, and I'm going to go and select every one of these little guys here. And then we're going to say right click, insert from BiblioMonkey. We're going to go to formula and we're going to choose if error 0. And just like that, boom, everything is done. So let's take a look. This one has our if error with the rounding. Again, with the rounding, This is the if error for the subtotal, another if error subtotal. When we move down, we got a bunch of rounding ones, another subtotal, and there is our foot of S15 minus S26 that has now been wrapped in the if error structure. And the nice thing about this is that anywhere that I want to do this, let's say that these guys are pulling from somewhere else and I want to be really careful with these, I can also go right click, insert, formula, if error 0, and boom, every one of those has now been wrapped in that same if error structure. So this is really, really useful. And I might create different versions of this for different things. Like, for example, if I hop back into BiblioMonkey here, maybe I would say, you know, this if error 0 here for a second, what I want to do is I want to add a new version that gives me if error blank. Well, it's pretty easy to do. I can just go and copy this formula, say add new. We can go and say, let's call this if error blank. And then we can wrap current cell contents in if error x comma quote quote. There we are. I can paste that in there, just put in a pair of double quotes. Nice, that'll work. It's an if error, whatever this current cell contents is, quote, quote, to return nothing. We can save that, and boom, there we go. We now have two different options that we can call as needed to do what we want. So for example, if I wanted to do that here for some reason, and I actually don't really want to do that here, but it's just a simple right click, formula, and there's my if error blank, and it will actually go and drop that into the cell, wrap every one of those formulas in there, and away we go. So nice and simple way to be able to create a reusable formula set that you can apply to different things. Now, full disclosure on this one, of course, this is wrapping the cell contents. What if we wanted to do something more? This worksheet shows a format of statement that I used to use all the time as a controller. And basically what it is we had some 2022 sales data that we've listed down here for our units sold. And we're trying to create our 2023 forecast. And the concept that we're looking here is that we want a global volume increase of 5%, but we want to override that in specific cases, maybe with a 10% or 0 minus. If it's blank, we want to use 5%. If it has a value of any kind, we want to use that instead. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go and select the range of data where I want all of my subtotals, and I'm going to recall a formula that I've written before and stored in BiblioMonkey. So I'm going to go right click here, insert from BiblioMonkey, formula, and I'm going to choose this volume forecast with override. This is a bit more of a complex formula. I don't want to type this every single time. And this is a common structure that I'll use. So I'll go and click on that, and you'll notice it's popped up with a whole bunch of information that it wants me to fill in. It's picked up the apply to range. That's what I selected beforehand. It says, where is your global volume increase? So I'm going to go and select this particular cell right here. We can see we've got F7. My monthly override percentage is going to be right here, H15, and the monthly volume that I'm working with is going to be H14. And the thing I want you to recognize about this is that all of these things, as I selected them, tagged correctly with the absolute and relative values based on what I actually set up in the signature. And when I go and say inject right now, you can see that all of these populate, and we're now going to get the kind of gross and ugly formula here that we need to see. So let me just go and expand this, and you can see that it looks like this. It's a let function with 3 variables that have been created. It's got the values in that I plugged in, F7, H15, H14, and it's got the rest of the signature pattern. You can understand why I don't want to write this from scratch every single time I use it. So how does that look in the BiblioMonkey? Well, in order to build this, what I did is I built this once, and then I copied the formula, Control C. I went into the BiblioMonkey, and I said, cool, let's go and grab this guy right here, paste it in. You can see it's got the equals on this one here. We're smart enough to work that part out. And then what I did is I actually went and tagged the actual cell references with a variety of different pieces here. Now you'll notice I would take that back just one character. So this is where it would say something like F7. And what I would do is I'd right click on this and I'd say add new prompt. And you'll notice that we get a whole bunch of different options here. You can have text or values, the cell contents, fully absolute, absolute column, relative rows, You've got worksheet names, qualified references. Those are the ones that are going to go with a worksheet name, bang, then the actual fully absolute or not. Each of these things you can enter in place. And when you do this, it will actually pop up something. So let me just go and grab this right here, enter global increase. I'm going to go and just delete this for a second. We'll go back to here, just put an A, and here we go. This is going to be a fully absolute reference. It pops up and says, what do you want for the prompt? I'm going to type in that, enter global percentage increase, and you can see that that's what it puts in place there. And therefore, when you actually go and recall this formula, it pops up with your defined prompts to pick up the correct reference type. And that's where the real strength of BiblioMonkey comes in, is you've created this so you know what this actually does. The From Table Arrange Monkey is a free feature available to everyone that dramatically improves the From Table experience that you actually get inside Excel natively. Now, I'm just going to show you a quick demo of what I believe the problems are with the default setup. Is if we take this range of data that we have sitting here, it's tabular, but it's not a table. Now, normally what I would do is I would press Control T to turn it into a table, and I would get this dialog. But you'll notice there's a couple of things here that aren't working properly. Number one, it does not give us a way to define the name up front. It's going to create one called Table 1, which I will then need to rename. This is something a lot of users forget to do, but it just makes your workbook healthier, gives you a nice table of contents down, and all kinds of other things that are really beneficial. The second thing is this data is all text-based, and notice that it has not flagged that it has headers. Well, plainly we can see that it has what look to be headers here. So let me cancel this, and I'm going to show you what happens when we use the default built-in version that comes with Monkey Tools. So I'm going to go click over here where I have some sales data, and I'm going to press Control T. And what happens is when I press Control T, it brings up our dialog. And what you can see here is that Table 1 is highlighted. If I was happy with everything here, I could just press OK, and boom, everything's done. Actually, I just have to press Enter. I don't even have to click it. And it works just as fast as the regular Create Table dialog that Microsoft gives you. But we also have the ability to go and just type over and change the name here and say OK. So at this point, I'm going to hit Enter, and boom, there we go. We get a nice table, and you'll notice that it is indeed called Sales. I can do it all in one step. I'm going to show you another cool little feature here. Is I'm going to grab this table here, press Control T. I'm going to call this one Budgets. And one of the other cool things we do here is we give you the option to create a connection-only Power Query right on the spot. So I can now go and click OK. Not only will it turn it into a table, but it also loads the Power Query. And if we double click on it and take a look, we can see in the source step that it is calling from the correct budgets table. That's a good thing because it means we get the chance to name the table before the Power Query is created, rather than Excel's default way, which would be to create a Power Query against Table 1, and then when you rename Table 1, it blows up the Power Query. So that's not really cool. So this gives us the ability to deal with that right up front. Now there's multiple ways to trigger this dialog. Another one of them is to do this. Right-click, Get Data from Table Arrange. Now what this will do is it's going to pull the data into Power Query, but we interrupt that to give you the same dialog, except missing one thing. Notice we get to name the table first, so I'm going to call it Categories. It has identified, unlike Excel's default, that my data does have headers. That's pretty cool, but you don't see the connection-only query box here. Why? Well, because we've triggered it from Get Data from Table Arrange, and therefore we know that it needs to go directly into Power Query so that we can then go and start making the correct assumptions for the things that we want to do. So there we go. That looks cool. I have my default set to load to connection only, so I'm going to hit Close Load, and it will load to connection only for me right away. There we are. Now I do want to show you one more final thing over here, is that I have some numeric data. It's just a block of data, and this one obviously has no headers. So let's see what happens when we press Control T. Notice it comes up and it says, what would you like to call this? I'm just going to go and call this one something, sensible like data. Notice it has not checked the box for my data has headers. And that's because we looked through it and we said, hey, this entire range is all numeric stuff. It doesn't appear to have anything across the top, so it probably doesn't have headers for you. Now, if you have headers, check the box, you're good to go. But we think that this is a smarter algorithm than what Excel provides by default and gets it right most of the time, where Excel's tends to get it wrong a lot of the time. Of course, I can also go and create a connection-only query here. And what you'll see is when I click OK, it's going to put in some default headers, column 1, 2, 3. And if I go and hop into Power Query and take a look here, what you'll see is that it has worked nicely. Here's my source step. There's the data range that we've set up. So it was named first, then the query created. Everything looks good. Now, whether you use Power Queries or not, even if you're just using the standard table features, I think you're going to find that this is a much more efficient way to create tables and it gets you into the habit of naming them properly, which is a recommended practice to make sure your workbook stays healthy. One of the great benefits of the Monkey tools from Table or Range Monkey is that it can actually take a look at your data and determine whether or not it is a table or a range. And this is actually quite different than the standard get data experience that you might be used to if you're using Excel. A case in point is this example, which happens to come from one of the examples we use in the Power Query Academy at Skillwave Training to teach how to unpivot subcategorized data. The problem is that when you go and you select this data range, what'll happen is when you go right click and you try to use the get data from table or range, which clearly indicates you should be able to pull your data from a range, what you get instead is an experience right away that looks like this. Well, that's create table. That's not bring it in from a range. So you have to set up your named range first. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you what it looks like when we use the Monkey Tools implementation. Again, this just comes for free with Monkey Tools right off the bat and is available to everyone. When we choose Get Data from Table or Range, it pops up the From Table or Range dialog. Now, if you want a table, that's not a problem. You can just click Table and you can go and you can set everything up. Notice it thinks that we have some headers here, which is fair. But if I don't want that, I can go back and say, look, I'd rather set up a named range here. So I can go and call this one here, let's call it statement or something like that. Notice we can define the named range to be a workbook or a sheet level scope if you need to do that. It's picked up the range of data. So now when I go and say, okay, it's going to launch me directly into Power Query. The thing that's important here is it did not create a table. It actually created a named range and is using that inside our setup here. So this is a name for statement. So I can now go and do the things that I want to do. At this point, I'm going to hit close and load because I want to make sure that you recognize just how important this is. When I click OK, you can see that this does not have all the colors. It does not have the Table Tools tab up the top here, but it is showing in the name box right here as statement. So in the normal world, you'd actually have to define this name here first before you use the get data from table or range in order to make this work. We just make it seamless and happen nice and easy. You hit get data, it says, look, this looks like a range. We'll let you define one of those. If you want to switch to table, no problem at all. You can do that too. Just a nice little quality of life improvement that you get for everybody for free with Monkey Tools. One of the great benefits of the Monkey Tools from Table or Range Monkey is that it can actually take a look at your data and determine whether or not it is a table or a range. And this is actually quite different than the standard get data experience that you might be used to if you're using Excel. A case in point is this example, which happens to come from one of the examples we use in the Power Query Academy at Skillwave Training to teach how to unpivot subcategorized data. The problem is that when you go and you select this data range, what'll happen is when you go right click and you try to use the get data from table or range, which clearly indicates you should be able to pull your data from a range, what you get instead is an experience right away that looks like this. Well, that's create table. That's not bring it in from a range. So you have to set up your named range first. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you what it looks like when we use the Monkey Tools implementation. Again, this just comes for free with Monkey Tools right off the bat and is available to everyone. When we choose Get Data from Table or Range, it pops up the From Table or Range dialog. Now, if you want a table, that's not a problem. You can just click Table and you can go and you can set everything up. Notice it thinks that we have some headers here, which is fair. But if I don't want that, I can go back and say, look, I'd rather set up a named range here. So I can go and call this one here, let's call it statement or something like that. Notice we can define the named range to be a workbook or a sheet level scope if you need to do that. It's picked up the range of data. So now when I go and say okay, it's going to launch me directly into Power Query. The thing that's important here is it did not create a table. It actually created a named range and is using that inside our setup here. So this is a name for statement. So I can now go and do the things that I want to do. At this point, I'm going to hit close and load because I want to make sure that you recognize just how important this is. When I click OK, you can see that this does not have all the colors. It does not have the table tools tab up the top here, but it is showing in the name box right here as statement. So in the normal world, you'd actually have to define this name here first before you use the get data from table or range in order to make this work. We just make it seamless and happen nice and easy. You hit get data, it says, look, this looks like a range. We'll let you define one of those. If you want to switch to table, no problem at all. You can do that too. Just a nice little quality of life improvement that you get for everybody for free with Monkey Tools. Now, personally, I think the features in the From Table or Range Monkey are pretty awesome and can't think why you wouldn't want to use them. But I've been around software development long enough to know that whenever we introduce a new feature to someone, the first response is, great, but how do I turn it off? And you may have your reasons. Maybe you're recording a video or maybe you just don't like the way it works. So I want to make sure that you have that option. Now, before I show you where those are, I just want to review really quickly one small thing around the implementation of the From Table or Range Monkey. I'm going to press Control T to launch the monkey. And what you can see here is that it shows up with the default table name highlighted in full. And the reason for this is so you can just start typing your new table name right away. So we can go and type in sales, and when you hit enter, it's going to go and commit it immediately. But there is another option that you might want from this. So let's take a look. I'm going to go into Monkey Tools, and I'm going to go to the Options Monkey. And in the Options Monkey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move across to the Global Options. And you'll notice that there's a few different options here. This top block is all around the From Table or Range Monkey. If you'd prefer to use Microsoft's default right-click and get data from table or range experience, you can check the box here and it'll fall back to that default. If you prefer to use the default Insert Table button for the Insert tab, you can do that too. Just check that box. If you would prefer that I don't override your Control-T experience, check the box here. Now, interestingly enough, both Control-T and Control-L are the shortcuts to create a table and apply the style that you used here. Notice I have overridden Control-L to use the default behavior, mainly because I do demos and I still want to be able to call up the old one to show why it's so bad. So I override that, and that's what you can see in this checkbox in this case. If you like the option to include a connection-only query by default, check that box. It'll always be checked for you when you open the form. Now, so the biggest thing is if you want to turn them off, check the boxes. If you want to leave them active, make sure the boxes are clear. Now, the other thing you'll notice here is that we also have the ability to go in and throw in some custom prefaces. And the whole point behind this is that some people like to preface their table names with TBL or their range names with RNG, for example. I'm going to go and type in a custom preface here of TBL, and I'm going to hit close, and I'm going to show you how the behavior has now changed a little bit on what we're working with. Now remember, I've overridden Control-L to use the default. It brings up this dialog. Now, I don't want that, so I'm going to get rid of it. We're going to go back to Control-T. This brings up the Monkey Tools version. Notice the difference of what's happening here now. It prefaces it with TBL, which is what I actually described, and then it only highlights the numeric indicator at the end. So I can now go and say, this is TBL budgets and start typing right away. I don't have to mouse or arrow to the end in order to get this. This is all about trying to make you just that little bit more efficient as you're going, you're building these things. And of course, once I've got it named the way I want, I can now say, okay, and away we go. There it is. TBL budgets has now been named properly. If you want to get rid of these things for any reason, all you need to do is go back into Monkey Tools, go back into the Options Monkey, go back to the Global Options, and if you want to get rid of any custom prefaces, just highlight them and click Delete, and you're now back to the point where it will actually give you a full table name that is fully highlighted that you can just replace. It really is just that easy. So the idea here is that you can customize this experience to work exactly the way you need. You can turn it off temporarily or permanently through those checkboxes if you want to go back to the old behavior. But I think you're going to find if you start working with it, it really adds a lot to your game, and you probably won't want to do that unless you've got maybe recording a video or demonstrating something to somebody else to show the default behavior. Anyway, I hope you find that useful. All right, so the rename table monkey is one that I joke is pretty shy. You won't see this guy on the ribbon anywhere, and he'll never come out for a free user either. This is a pro feature. It does work on the pro trial, but this monkey only shows up specifically when he's needed. Outside of that, you'll never see him in the wilds. No ribbon button, nothing like that. Now, before I show you what this monkey actually does, I'm going to show you first how to turn it off, just in case you need to. And that way, I can show you the behavior of what happens when this monkey isn't in your arsenal. So we're going to go and we're going to click on the options monkey, and we're going to go to global options, and I'm going to choose this one here, use default edit table name experience. This is what we use to actually turn off the rename table monkey. We're going to say close. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and take a look at this sales table here. Go to table design. You'll notice that I have a query in place for sales already, but the source table is called table 1, and that's a terrible name for a table. So I'm going to go and change this. So I must have built this before I put Monkey Tools in place and could actually name my tables properly through different tools. So here we go. We're going to hit sales. We'll hit enter. And now we're just going to go a mouse over the query peak here, and you'll notice it says, I'm sorry, I can't find table 1. So this is the problem with the default experience of getting data in Excel, is when you use the default get data menu, it doesn't allow you to name your table first. It creates you one called table 1, and when you then change your table name, it blows up. Now, if you're using the from table range monkey, which is free for everybody, you can name things up front. That's all good. If you change your mind later, you still have this problem where this doesn't flow through the Power Query. So let's go back right now to Monkey Tools. We'll go back to our options monkey here. And what I'm going to do at this point in time is I'm going to go to my global options, and I'm going to choose to, again, put this thing back in place. We're going to activate our rename table monkey. And again, we don't see him. He's just kind of hiding in the weeds, waiting until he's necessary. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come over to table design, and I'm going to rename this back to table 1, because that's what it was beforehand. And I need to rehook this so that this is actually working. Okay. At this point though, what I want to do is I now want to change this to sales. Okay. So table 1 is linked to the sales query, but when I now rename it to sales with my rename table monkey actually working for me, when I hit enter, and I go across and take a look, what you'll notice is that it's still working. Oh, that's pretty cool. So let me close this. Let's go over to the budget table. We'll make sure that we're not doing anything with weird shenanigans here. Notice this one is table 2. This is going to budget. So we can see we've got the same values up at the top here, starting with the 43,683. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change this to budget. We'll notice that it's still working. There we are. There's the 43,683. And if I decide, you know what, actually, I don't really like that. I should have made that plural. I'm just going to come back over here and change this to budgets. Now, just to make sure that I'm not snowing here, I also want to show you this. Let's double click on budgets and open it up. We're going to go back to the source step here and notice that it has been updated. It is no longer listed as table 2 or budget. It's actually showing up as budgets. So this is what our rename table monkey actually does. He kind of hides in the back there, but when you change a table name through the interface here, what's going to happen is that monkey will go and take a look through all your Power Queries and make sure that, oh, hey, that one pointed to the old table name. We'll just update that and fix it for you. Now, I do want to be clear here. If you rename something through the name manager box here, that we don't actually look at, okay? The monkey's like, no, you did way too much work on this. You must have wanted to hurt yourself for some reason. So we're just going to leave that one where it is. But if you rename it through your table design, we're pretty sure that you really wanted your Power Queries fixed, so the monkey will take care of that for you.